This is the breakdown of Darth Malak's lightsaber skills that I originally drafted for Darth Malak vs. Grandmaster Yoda, uploaded back in 2015, albeit with numerous tweaks and refinements. I'm re-editing and re-uploading this older content as something of an announcement and preview for my upcoming collaboration with EvanNova95, where we will be pitting Lord Malak against Count Dooku. Rest assured, I will be drafting an entirely new breakdown for that video. For those of you who are unaware, Darth Malak, voiced by Rafael Ferrer, is the primary antagonist of the 2003 Bioware RPG, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, serving as the game's final boss. In addition to the video game itself, my analyses will also be referencing his appearances in the Knights of the Old Republic comic series, published from 2006 to 2010, as well as the statements of the game's lead writer, Karpyshyn. However, this analysis will not be referencing the video game strategy guide, nor the tie-in tabletop RPG campaign guide published in 2008, simply because I didn't have access to those sources when I drafted this breakdown. Furthermore, some of the information presented is personal speculation and supposition, as this was before I got into the habit of meticulously citing my sources. Now that I've finished my preamble, allow me to present this vintage breakdown of Darth Malak's martial proficiencies and tactics. As a veteran of the Mandalorian Wars and an infamous Sith warlord, Darth Malak stood as one of the most skillful and experienced lightsaber masters of his day. Karpyshyn, the lead writer for Knights of the Old Republic, described Malak as the brawn to Darth Revan's brain, and credited him as the superior lightsaber duelist. In a private email, Karpyshyn stated his view that Malak practiced a one-handed version of Juyo. Juyo was the seventh form of lightsaber combat and the most demanding of all, employing bold, direct moves driven by intense, focused emotion. As the technique was so advanced, only high-level masters of multiple fighting styles could even attempt to study it, which made it so that no two applications of Form 7 were ever alike, as all students of the art were going in with entirely different skill sets and backgrounds. Based on his physical technique and moveset, the prevailing belief is that Malak's likely foundation forms were the contention form Makashi and the aggression form Ataru. Makashi was an ancient form developed specifically for blade-to-blade combat, employing linear cut-and-thrust swordplay based around precision and efficiency. Ataru was more contemporary, an extremely aggressive form based around elaborate flourishing swordplay reinforced by dynamic force-assisted acrobatics and physical combat techniques. The primary example of a duelist who relied on a Makashi-Ataru hybrid was the Clone Wars-era Jedi Master Shaak Ti. Darth Malak's personal technique was dexterity-based but hard-hitting, consisting of elaborate flourishing blade work paired off with relaxed fencing postures. Malak's style was optimized for unloading on opponents with dynamic high-speed attack sequences, fully leveraging his innate athleticism while expending as little energy as possible. Nimbly springing about on the balls of his feet, Malak was highly maneuverable, reinforcing his style with balletic twirls and flying somersaults, in addition to the fluid integration of ranged force attacks. This already formidable technique was then further reinforced by his application of Juyo, ramping up his offensive output with dark side channeling. The result was a trade-off. On the one hand, his customized style was both incredibly effective and easily sustained in the long term, turning him into a nigh unstoppable juggernaut of destruction, capable of breaking an opponent's guard and overwhelming them with only a few moves. But on the other, the reliance on purely offensive blade work left him at a disadvantage when forced into a defensive posture. while his emphasis on pure swordsmanship left him vulnerable against unarmed combat techniques. Furthermore, while absolutely devastating in single combat, his preferred tactic of isolating his adversaries indicated that he was likely weak against large groups of assailants. Darth Malak was not particularly well regarded as a strategist, criticized for his overemphasis on brute force, though I see this perception as being entirely due to negative comparisons to Darth Revan, who stood as one of the greatest strategic minds in galactic history. Taken on his own merits, Malak proved his mettle as both a tactical planner and analyst. During the battle for the Starforge, he correctly deduced that none of his followers were capable of stopping Revan, but he was able to use them to both slow Revan down and force his allies to break off to run damage control, isolating the former Dark Lord and buying himself more time to prepare his chosen battlefield in advance of their confrontation. Though he ultimately overestimated the effect that the Force-based technology of the Starforge would have on the contest, he demonstrated a keen understanding of both his enemies and his allies, and an ability to control engagements on the grand scale. His tactics on a more immediate level were best demonstrated in his confrontation with Revan, Bastila Shan, and Cartho Nasi on board the Leviathan. He was effectively dropped into this contest cold, having no prior knowledge of Revan's escape before his own arrival, and yet was able to come up with an effective plan of attack almost immediately. He used Force Stun to disable Shan and Onasi, allowing him to focus his efforts on Revan, and after a brief bout, he retreated into the network of corridors around the Leviathan's docking bay, luring Revan after him and further isolating him. Had Revan's allies not been able to intervene when they did, Malak would have prevailed. Even then, Malak was still able to turn things back in his favor, isolating Shan while forcing Revan and Onasi to flee. Though Revan survived, Malak still achieved one of his main strategic objectives in the war, the capture of Bastila Shan. Malak was an expert at controlling his battlefield, using it to herd his opponents and hedge his own bets. The primary example being when he used the technology of the Starforge to amplify his powers during his final confrontation with Revan. He displayed a good understanding of his own strengths and limitations through his emphasis on isolating and overwhelming his adversaries, the occasional unsubstantiated verbal boast notwithstanding, and he knew to keep certain elements in reserve in case his initial response proved insufficient. He didn't actively draw upon the power of the Starforge until he was certain that his native abilities were insufficient. Though arrogant, he was wise enough to realize that a contest where he was forced to exhaust his bag of tricks was not an unlikely hypothetical, but an eventuality. This in mind, his application of his fighting style was likely based around cycling through radically different offensive sequences, adapting his technique to suit the opponent. It should be noted that while Malak has employed tactical retreats to regain his composure when driven onto his back foot, he has never actually fled from battle, his honor and his ego demanding that he stick it out like a man rather than run like a coward. That being said, he was perfectly willing to use treachery and sneak tactics to turn a fight around or ambush an opponent. In conclusion, Darth Malak was a dangerously unpredictable and cunning offensive dervish. Though his lack of defensive viability was a significant weakness, I would characterize it as a calculated risk rather than a reckless oversight, one that he effectively compensated for through his tactical ingenuity and masterful use of the dark side. Though the limitations of his method left him ill-suited for confrontations with duelists of equal or greater skill, he never ceased to be a serious threat, no matter who he was engaging.